Please.
Thank you. That was the old title of my presentation. There's a new title here now, which is Challenges for Foresight to Enable Prosperity of Cities. So the reason of this change is that because I think most of us in the room are convinced that foresight is something interesting and it is something useful. So we see some potentials. It's great. It's very exciting. You look like you are looking at your field, at your area, not behind the desk, but at the top of a desk. So you see further, you see distant future. And there are lots of uncertainties there, and there's an unwritten future which you can write yourself, which is very exciting, extremely exciting. And we began this with this idea, so we took the great step of the usefulness of foresight. So that's why I decided not to talk about how good foresight is, how it can help you to solve all of your problems and so on. I just wanted to take the discussion a step further to explain, okay, we want to do foresight, it's a good thing, it's useful, but actually this is just the beginning of the story. Beginning is usually the halfway, but the second half is also important. During the discussions since the beginning of yesterday, so that we are also aware of some of the issues which are coming at the second step after a decision on embarking upon a foresight exercise. What are these? Like aging population, economic downturn, disasters, migration, population movements all around, and some social cohesion problems, environmental problems, energy problems, and so on. These are also familiar to you. So we are moving well. So far everything is good. I think the problem begins once we start thinking, okay, how to do it, how to achieve it, how to do some kind of foresight exercise which can create an impact. There are some challenges there also. So my presentation will highlight some of those challenges that you will face in order to achieve some impactful foresight, which can hopefully create some kind of output. It can be used by some different stakeholders so that they can get your messages and start doing something. Otherwise, we will keep asking the question of, okay, we have done this excellent foresight exercise. We have beautiful scenarios for the future. Look, everything looks great. We have a great vision, but it's not happening. So it's not still moving. So what is the problem? So besides these grand challenges we have, I will add another grand challenge of dealing with those grand challenges. So what are those ways we can deal with those grand challenges? Those grand challenges we face, first of all, we need to understand their nature. Grand challenges are wicked problems that they have all sorts of structural problems, behavioral problems, and organizational problems that we have to deal with. And they usually concern large part of society, so they are not isolated. It is very difficult to draw some boundaries around them because then we will start covering all sorts of different issues. They do not fit into our current institutional, disciplinary, or governance structures, so they are different in nature, so we need some kind of different organization. They are not only technological problems, they are not only engineering problems, they are not only social problems also, but they cover all these different dimensions. So we need to kind of mix and match disciplines in a different way. I attended a workshop for a project which we are doing research and innovation in 2030. So we try to understand what research will look like and how it will be organized, how it will be funded, and so on. We gradually come to the point that maybe the existing disciplinary structures in universities and higher education institutions will gradually disappear, and a new division or a new kind of a system, not a division, but a system will emerge based on some of these grand challenges we face, because they are becoming more important and they involve all these disciplines to come together, and our existing engineering faculties, arts and humanities, medicine, and so on, this cannot be divided in this way anymore because they all need to interact with each other to really be more relevant to our current and future problems. So there are some serious issues there, and we may see some transformation towards this, a new kind of disciplinary classification or some new approaches. Of course, all this requires some sort of foresight, but there are challenges, conceptual challenges, methodological challenges, and operational challenges on how to put these ideas into practice. I will address only some of them. The challenges are bigger, so they are serious also. So it's, as I said, a great step to start a foresight exercise to attract some funds for that. But in order to achieve real outcome which can be used by the actors, we need to understand the nature of these challenges and develop some approaches to tackle with them. So these are grand challenges for foresight to deal with the grand challenges of cities. It is cities at the moment because our talks are around cities today. So the first step, the first grand challenge is to understand the complex and systemic nature of grand challenges. As I said, these are not simple problems. They are not complicated problems either, they are complex. So we need to understand this complex nature of problems where all different actors and systems interact with each other in a way which we cannot totally understand. So we need to draw some boundaries and identify them, and then only after that we can start studying them. And there are so many known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. So this terminology was used earlier to explain the situation by Donald Rumsfeld in 2002 to explain the situation in Iraq. So what happened after they went to Iraq and what kind of things they faced. So he said there were known unknowns, so things that we didn't know, we know that we didn't know, things that we didn't know that we know, and things that we don't know that we don't know. So all sorts of problems, some mess, basically. So there are situations like this in the case of foresight and futures also. And this applies to the future of cities. Another challenge is combining quantitative and qualitative information. So all sorts of data just flows into discussions, so how to make use of it. I will touch that very briefly also. And the challenge of vision and consensus building on grand challenges. And finally, some grand responses to grand challenges. Because grand challenges require grand responses. And that may well go beyond the boundaries of our power. So that's why we need some collaboration and interaction. So I know that the time is very limited, so my grand challenge at the moment is to finish presentation on time as a speaker. So I'll be quick. I have already mentioned grand challenges are complex and they are systemic, so we need to understand the systemic nature of problems, which requires some systemic approaches. So they are fuzzy in boundaries. If you talk about some water problems or energy problems, you will see that it's not only about the generation of energy, it is about its distribution, regulation, price of energy, changing people's and society's behavior, and then towards a more kind of energy efficient society. And they involve complex and systemic relationships within and between social, technological, economic, ecological, political, and value systems. So we need to understand how this interaction really works. It is not very difficult to understand this interaction. It is enough just if you think about your past 24 hours and what you did during this time. You had your breakfast and you became a part of food chain, you took a shower, you used the water infrastructure, that water has to be there in a good quality, it has to flow on your top, and then you use some kind of transportation in order to reach here, that bus or train had to be there on time, and the traffic should be flowing well, so it has to be managed properly, and we are here and interacting with each other, there's a social system behind it. You use ITs, and to reach your emails, to read them, to reply to them, to interact with other people, so you have some kind of social interaction and so on. So if you just look at your 24 hours, you will see how we cross-cut all these systems in our lives continuously. So the problem is basically to create a future which can live and survive in a similar way. And that is a kind of a systemic design of the future. So it's not only one element that you take the technology, I have a new product in here, so it will solve all the problems. It won't probably, because you need some kind of other structural and behavioral transformations to deal with them. I've already touched the final point that grand challenges may not fit with the existing thematic and disciplinary structures of research, policy making, and funding. So if you look at how disciplines are identified at the moment, or they are divided, how ministries are organized in government, so you see that this kind of traditional disciplinary approach still continues. And they still try to work independent from each other with very limited systemic interaction. So I think to deal with this kind of systemic problems, you need to work in a systemic way also and organize things in a different way. So we need to formulate them. I wanted to add some examples here to make it more relevant to our discussion with cities. So this is to create some kind of more energy efficient city. So you see that how the system basically works at the conceptual level. So if you go into the details of that, you will go another level of complexity. So, but you can see that the energy. So this is the first thing, that when we talk about cities, our cities don't have closed boundaries, so they have open boundaries and they interact with other cities, other networks, so we should understand that they are open in nature, so that's not like a closed entity which can live and survive itself. The first step, just extraction of energy and its transfer into city, is a good example of this. So it's extracted somewhere else, and it is transferred, and then it is brought into the system as an input. So you may see that you need to deal with some other factors, other actors who may be found outside the city. So it is a higher level issue that you need to deal with. And all sorts of things about agriculture, about factories, about the way our cities are organized. So whether this infrastructure can cope with this kind of grand challenge, it's a big question. And lots of financial investments are required, of course, to transform. Because if we want to just make things better with the current infrastructure, we will quickly reach its limits. So it won't be like a post-carbon society. It will be low-carbon society or lower carbon society. But in order to achieve kind of a post-carbon society level, we probably need some kind of more serious transformation, and this will involve some reorganization and restructuring of cities, including our lifestyles. So it will have impacts on us individually at the same time. The second issue is, I see that some circles are emerging. Lots of, again, noun, unknowns, unknown nouns, sorry, yes, okay, I'll be quick. Unknown unknowns in grand challenges. So I already told about this. So we use this kind of phenomenon to explain ignorance in Foresight. I will quickly go to the example related to that. So the case of Fukushima, for example, nuclear disaster. So you see that people are protesting in here. So there's a reason for that, because the damage was huge. There were all sorts of known unknowns, like the timing and likelihood of an earthquake. We knew that there could be an earthquake, but nobody knew what the magnitude of this earthquake would be. There were only 4 big, large magnitude earthquakes in humans' history, around 9 magnitude, and this was actually one of them. So we don't know if there was any kind of a foresight when Fukushima nuclear plant was built or it was decided, but we can see that there were some ignorances involved in that. So there were some known unknowns, the timing and likelihood of an earthquake, unknown knowns that we knew already, but we pretended like we don't know. Like emergence of an earthquake, such a strong earthquake, which is very rare. So that's why we ignore it, but it comes and creates a big devastation. And the unknown in that case was enormous amounts of energy released, and then consequent to tsunami. So this earthquake coupled with tsunami with an eventual devastation. So we didn't know the scale of this. Qualitative and quantitative techniques. We saw yesterday from Microsoft that we can measure everything, we observe everything, we have millions of sensors all over the place. So, okay, what to do with this data? Who is going to interpret it? So this is not totally objective also. There are also sort of subjectivity and also ignorance involved in this data. So it is important to realize that also. So there are all sorts of issues we need to deal with in here, emerging from different worldviews, factors, and actors, which may involve some quantitative and qualitative information. So we have a challenge of combining these two. Some approaches and methods we can use in Foresight to do this. Vision and consensus building. Grand challenges are not problems which you can solve in the next 5 years, which is the lifetime of a government. It will probably involve 10 governments in the future. So it's very difficult to encourage people to start dealing with them. They are very long term, and we don't know if we can solve those problems very quickly, if any solution exists at all. So we need to discuss this. And it requires a lot of investments, huge amount of investments, which requires some kind of courage for governments really to push, because there are some risks in investment in that field. So we need to understand this. So if we recognize grand challenge but nothing is happening, that might be because of this risk that nobody wants to put their hand under the stone. So we need to understand the nature of that. You can see that there are all sorts of different actors with different expectations. So it is a challenge, it is a grand challenge for Foresight to achieve some common vision and to build consensus. And grand responses to grand challenges. Imagine even if we created some kind of consensus, we still need to build some communities of innovators, collaborative, interdisciplinary, and global. So some kind of systemic interaction, systemic action is required to bring together scientific and technological, social and business innovation simultaneously, not separately, together as a system. And again, some kind of transformations which we may observe in transforming our cities in the long, medium, and short run. So first building values, then starting transitions, then achieving an eco-intelligent city, hopefully, in the future. Conclusions. So basically, I'm a Foresight researcher myself and a practitioner, so this presentation for myself also. So I'm not only telling or giving these messages to you, I'm also taking this as a challenge for myself and trying to find some ways on how best we can tackle with these challenges. Because only then we can improve our foresight, we can achieve impactful foresight, and then our foresight will still have a good reputation and continuity, hopefully, in the near future. So our tasks in this case are identifying future challenges for cities, current challenges, align those actors around the challenges, discuss some of the expected and unexpected consequences, investigate in those known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. Probably we cannot do much about the last one, but we still need to think about it with a different hat, with a different perspective, and propose some disruptive transformations in order to respond to those grand challenges, because grand challenges will not be achieved with some marginal or incremental transformations. They need some bigger push, bigger investments, and eventually bigger risks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.